Good evening. Welcome to the William G. McGowan Theater for tonight's screening and discussion of the 1971 film, The People and the Police. I'm Jim Gardner, Executive for Legislative Archives, Presidential Libraries, and Museum Services. And I'm here at the Archives, and I'm pleased to be able to welcome you on behalf of David Ferriero, the Archivist of the United States. I want to extend a special welcome to those of you who are watching live on our YouTube channel. Tonight, the past and present combine as we examine the important and timely topic of police-community relations. Following our film, we will welcome to the stage our distinguished panel, NBC4 reporter Tom Sherwood, civil rights veteran Frank Smith Jr., DC community activist Susan Meehan, and interim Metropolitan Police Chief Peter Newsham. But before we begin the program, before we start the film, I'd like to tell you about two upcoming programs that will take place here in the McGowan Theater. On Tuesday, September 13 at noon, we will welcome author Larry Tye as he discusses his latest book, Bobby Kennedy, The Making of a Liberal Icon, in which he explores RFK's extraordinary transformation from cold warrior to fiery leftist. Book signing follows that program. And then on Thursday of the same week, September 15th at 7 p.m., we will present the 10th annual State of the Constitution discussion in partnership with the Robert H. Smith Center for the Constitution at James Madison's Montpelier. This year's focus is the future of policymaking under our current constitutional system and against the backdrop of national elections. To learn more about these and all our other public programs and exhibits, consult our monthly calendar of events in print or online at archives.gov. There are copies in the lobby as you leave tonight, along with the sign-up sheet so you can receive it by regular mail or email. You'll also find brochures about either National Archives, about other National Archives programs and activities. Another way to get more involved with the National Archives is to become a member of the National Archives Foundation. The foundation supports the work of the agency, especially the education and outreach programs such as tonight's. Pick up your application for membership in the lobby or become a member online at archivesfoundation.org. So, in the aftermath of the 1968 assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the ensuing riots in Washington, D.C., the Office of Economic Opportunity created the Pilot District Project, established in the 3rd District, to foster the development of community programs and improve the shattered relationship between the city's citizens and its police force. As part of that ambitious project, the government agency contracted with Guggenheim Productions to produce a documentary and a series of training films that could be used when they rolled the program out to other cities around the country. What we're about to see is that documentary, CG 8225, The People and the Police, completed in 1971. Although the Office of Economic Opportunity spent nearly $200,000 for this film and the training films, and in 1971 that was a more significant sum than it is today, they were dissatisfied with the results, and the films were never released to the public. However, the surviving film, which has undergone a new high-definition transfer by film preservation specialists here at the National Archives, this film serves not only as a record of the Washington, D.C. community and the turmoil it was experiencing in the late 1960s, but also serves as a springboard for tonight's conversation.
I would say the residents that actually live in the precinct are law-abiding.
The everyday average working man, the respectable people, we have no problems at all.
The only time they don't like you is when you catch them doing something they're not supposed to be doing.
And all the time I've been here, I've never really had any problems with the community itself. I don't consider this, you know, the riffraff and whatnot out here in the street part of the community.
If you've got a job to do as a policeman, and you might get about 5% of them might give you trouble, and the other 95 don't give you much trouble because they know whether they're wrong or right, and they know who you are.
Let's get somebody on it then, I mean.
Wait a minute, I'm
Take this red tape paperwork. Suppose he can't write his pencil break on it, I mean. Red tape is good. They show you the form they used back when George Washington came over here. Write it all down.
You know what I want from the police?
What's that?
I want the police to protect life and property in my neighborhood, and that's all. If you do that, then you'll cover everything else.
I've seen them twice, twice that I can remember, ride through this street. But never once have I seen them walk through this street. Never once.
They don't seem to let you get along with them, you know.
The police concerned, that's something I don't deal too much with, but as far as I can see and know about, it seems as though they get along all right. As far as I know.
I can't work with a road. Can't get along, man. I've been fighting roads there since I was young.
Yeah, and they still calling us niggers, man.
The real man to ask is the hard-working, lower middle class, father of family black man who really wants it. He's the worst prey of crime than I am.
But the point is, the riot came through here and messed up everything. It burnt everything. And that's what closed them down. The white boys run. They ran.
All those in favor, raise their hand. 15. All those opposed?
5.
All right, the motion is carried. We'll proceed with the election of your chairman and vice chairman. First of all, I would hope that the chairman and vice chairman would work closely with the staff in doing such things as reviewing previous meetings, minutes of previous meetings, of perhaps developing an agenda according to what the chairman wishes.
Well, it's still open for nomination, Chairman. Are there any additional nominations for chairman?
Nobody's got their hand up.
Can we stick to our main job first, and that is getting the precinct selected? Can we give each person who is on this committee credit for being a fair-minded citizen? If we're going to sit up and anticipate everything that can go wrong, it will never get off of the ground.
It says the committee will have complete freedom in determining the criteria by which the site for the pilot program is to be chosen. We're into our third meeting, and most of us are busy, and the thing is so simple. And I feel that the old business is simply what's in this letter. We haven't done this. And I'd also like to recommend that we ought to have a parliamentarian appointed by the committee so that all of us can quit playing games, because this is what we've been doing for the last 2 weeks.
I would move that this committee appoint a committee from among volunteers.
You know, it'd be helpful if the chair got a little chance.
It's out of order when you haven't heard it.
We got a motion and an amendment on the floor.
Hey.
So we got.
I suggest that we could have much better meetings if the chair didn't participate too much.
You know, I've listened to discourteous people long enough in this meeting. What's all about? I can't understand it.
Chairman should not talk as much as you.
Man, I don't dig it at all. I mean,
for people to believe in orderly procedures, it's a very peculiar thing to jump up in the meeting and start yelling. Marion?
Everybody and his mother knows that the police is the #1 problem in America. And if you all don't want to deal with that, that's your problem. But at least let me have a say-so and whether or not it's the kind of thing I want. And I don't think a lot of us understand that. Maybe we're happy that the mayor asked us to come here. I'm not. You know, no big thing for me. I've been on more important committees than this. So I'm saying that my issue is how do you get the committee to use its power? Now, I'm not concerned about what happens to Marion Barry, because when I go out here, more than likely, I can deal with the police, more than likely. But I'm talking about what do we do for the 600,000 black people out here who do have a problem with the police.
I move that the secretary call the roll and let each person at this point state whether or not he can carry out the charges of this letter as he was appointed by the mayor.
You have the motion, Mr. Chairman. Are you supposed to put it on the floor? It'd be nice if I could, if we could understand it.
Well, I understand what Mr. Baldwin's motion is.
You have the motion, Mr. Chairman. Are you supposed to put it on the floor?
I think this motion was covered in the first meeting. We all voted at the first meeting to carry out what it was we were called here for. So I don't see any point in having another roll call.
I have a motion now, Mr. Chairman, on the floor.
Second the motion.
All those in favor of...
Vote by roll call, and that was, I said originally, by roll call.
Oh.
Yeah, by roll call. Secretary, like to read the roll?
James Baldwin.
Yes.
Marion Barry.
No.
Virgil Hines.
Brown, 1st to 8th on the hour, station at 1. Moody, 8th to 13th on the half, 1:34 when Woods goes to court this afternoon, and 408T from 8 to 12. Littles, 13th to 16th on the hour, 14th and V is a school crossing all day. Marble, 16th to 19th, 1:32.
I mean, no, man.
Don't walk up on me, bro.
I mean, no.
Now then stop.
I mean, no. Yeah, I mean, don't hit him, James. Don't hit him, man.
Get up, bro.
Get up, boy. Damn.
What's wrong? Jump on one.
Come on, baby.
Come on, around the thing. You gotta come here and take, bro.
Go with it, man.
Sure. Come on.
Come on.
The traffic lane.
You take the coat, I take it.
Carry him up there. Okay. How did he get drunk?
So my point is very simple. I feel that if I'm going to be out there, and I don't mind because I got a tough back, that I ought to get something for people out here in the community. I think that's my role as a leader or in leadership position is to get something if I can do it and be beat to death if I can do it. But if I'm going to be beat to death, I might as well get something for it, and I'm talking about the control of this whole program. That's why I can't move ahead. That's why I got problems. That's why I can't get the enthusiasm to go.
Now, it seems to me that that last statement in here says, if there are any questions, please call Mr. Shellow's office. Now, I don't know whether anybody else called Mr. Shellow's office, whether anybody had conferences with Mr. Shellow. I know I did.
Mrs. Sarpy, I did not contact Mr. Shellow. I had quite a few questions, so I confess to negligence in that particular respect. I would like to ask for some direction. I'm interested in the overall objectives and specifically how, once the precinct has been selected and either erected or occupied, it will function to speak directly to the problems for which this committee was created. And I'd like to hear that from you, sir.
A pilot precinct implies that there's an experimental quality to it. That means that we're going to try out new ideas. We're going to try out another relationship between the police and the citizenry.
So who is we and who's going to control?
We represent, in this case, the city government, no? The police.
You're not really talking about this committee, then, when you say we are going to try to make innovations.
Not at all.
All right. Thank you. No, I want you to finish. I didn't want to...
Okay. The overall goal of the project is to try to get at what we recognize is now a pervasive distrust between the citizens and the police. Now, when you talk about control, it falls short of a total citizen control of the precinct. And there was never any provision in the grant or in the plan for that sort of control. That's absolute control. Is that clear?
We in the black community see the police as enemies. And I remind everybody here that I may very well be shot as I walk out of that door if I happen to anger some white policeman. I'm very much aware of that, and every black person is. And therefore, we want to control those individuals, especially since the central police force is not capable of even recruiting the capable black men in this black city. It has to go out to places like Odd, West Virginia, and find individuals who have very questionable backgrounds. I, Charles Cassell, can no longer serve on a committee which cannot possibly make changes if it functions only in an advisory capacity. I see a constant recurrence of the conflict between the police and the community until the community finally has some measure of control over the police. That means to make decisions.
We are sitting here today trying to select the area, and it was not going as long as we keep having this stuff. Look at this stuff.
You have with your meeting, you select your precinct, but whatever precinct that you put it in, Marshall Brown will put every heart, every drop of blood, every energy that I have from now on to organize against this goddamn thing. And you go ahead and do what you're going to have to do. So I'll leave and you get your people.
Yes, sir. Oh, I don't think this is right. To come here and have people to want to, petty politics, that's what it is. Petty politics, as small as they can get. You know, because some people come in here within their minds to cause confusion what is happening here. I come here away from my people to try to do something that's going to help the city and the kids and everything else, and y'all people sit up here to play games. You know, when you get straightened out, Mr. Secretary, I'm not saying I'm resigning, but if they get any kind of understanding, right, send me a letter, postcard or something so I can come back here and we can get together on this thing, please.
And to sample these wishes, tonight hearings are being held in 3 of the precincts.
Can we get a truthful vote for number 13 precinct out of this audience?
It's not anybody who lives in this precinct that's black and that's court-held from the police department wants this program.
We select who works in the neighborhood, and if he lives in the neighborhood, and if he's black, it's very unlikely he's going to be coming down on his brother.
Regardless of how we vote, we are the people of yesterday.
You can't buy the youth anymore.
But why is all of these black community got this pilot program? We're tired of being guinea pigs.
Think about the pilot police. White folks is conning again.
When your name is called, you give the precinct of your choice.
Mr. Edward Brooks. Precinct 2. Mr. Virgil Crimes.
14.
14. Monsignor Gingras. Number 13. Mr. Theodore Higgins.
Number 13.
Number 13. Mrs. Elizabeth Sarpy. Number 2. Mr. John Zoyak.
Mr. Chairman, Federation of Citizens Association instructed me to vote for no precinct. It is opposed to the concept of the model precinct.
All right. The results of that ballot was number 13 has 14, number 14 has 11, and number 2 has 6.
Jim, I'm wondering whether we should not close with a prayer rather than open with a prayer today. This is what citizen participation is, and it may be a long process, but I have faith that in the long run it's a sound one. I think that the wisdom of your choice will be borne out, and we'll try the best we can to do as good a job as we can in 13 as in any of the other precincts.
I know we adjourn. Any other business anybody would like to bring up? Not in the meeting. Second adjourn.
Regarding how to set up an election, this is a very complicated thing. It turns out to be also rather expensive.
How many on the board?
No decision on that either.
I don't think you people have the right concept on this when you think that a police force is an adversary force occupying a territory. And I told that right to Mayor Washington, right smack in his face.
Because they don't accept me as a first-class citizen,
Oh,
so I have to do it
you are
myself.
a first-class
No, I'm not. Name a place where I'm a first-class citizen.
Well, I think all the laws provide that you are.
Well, nobody abide by the laws. They did. Wouldn't have to go to the police pilot thing.
Well, now, you
Nobody abide by the laws.
just tell me where you're not accepted on that. I think you've got all the rights by law, haven't you?
And so the group is so agreed, and this is your program, and
Where you get paid.
since everybody signed so they could be paid, gentlemen, shall we begin to talk to the issues that have most importance to you, and feel free to talk.
We're going to get a lot of training in the next year and a half. As it stands right now, we're supposed to be finding out what the problems of the citizen on the street are and how we should better react to them. How about them finding out about what our problems are, too?
I made a suggestion, which was, in order to reach these people, is to have them here. The leaders, the Gaston Neals, the Rap Browns, the Marion Barrys,
They're heard more than the decent citizens, because decent citizens go to work in the morning, they come home at night, and they're home, and that's it. They go out. The only time they're heard from is when they go down to the store and get robbed.
How do you gentlemen feel about how that citizens group ought to operate? Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Anything at all that we do here is worth a try to avoid some of the disastrous things that have happened throughout many cities in this country that we've all been ashamed of.
I don't know. Are we getting real readings on what the opinion is out in the community?
There seems to be some attitude among maybe some of us that the citizens in this precinct have a completely negative attitude towards the police officers, and I don't believe this is true at all.
Maybe everybody's not convinced of that.
It's still not going to appease the militants down there that are causing so much of the problem to begin with. So whatever we do here is not going to help the situation down there at all. It's got to be the people down there.
May I have your attention, please? Why, number 13, selected as a pilot precinct when it was under strong protest. They voted that the 13th precinct should get the project. Who is they? Who is they?
This project is an experiment. This is your opportunity, beginning opportunity, the citizens of the 13th precinct, from one end to the other, top to bottom, to have a say in police policy in your precinct.
I'll stay right here. first meeting in the hope that I could get something done for black citizens in terms of police department. But when I got there, I discovered that the program had already been packaged and put together. Secondly, what we discovered was that when we finally got down to the nitty-gritty, these citizens would have more or less an advisory role rather than a control role over the police. And so I think we ought to understand here, either we're going to let them know we don't want this precinct pilot program like it is, or we're going to control it. And if we can't control it, I think we're going to run it out of here. That's my personal
I tell you, I am actually ashamed that these young people are in my generation. If I were to do some of the stuff these punks are doing out on the street now, my old man would kick my fanny up around my ears. Personally, I believe a police officer's job is to enforce the law as written, and not to be a sociologist or a psychiatrist. There's a heck of a lot of times when you've got to be, sure, but they should teach you the law.
Here, somebody, cold cocked him out here, put him out in the other guy around the corner, somebody he didn't want to hit him.
Jesus Christ. You mean that's what the firebox for? You all right, man?
Brown, no way. The pool room, running.
All right, now look, Mr. Wallace.
Okay.
You were inside the pool room, right?
Yeah.
You were playing pool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what happened then? You were in there playing pool. Did somebody just walk up and hit you?
Yeah.
For no reason at all?
Yeah. We're playing pool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Absolutely. You're going to do this, you're going to do this. Bam-a-lam, bam-a-lam.
Well, what were you arguing about?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah.
You bound to know why he hit you.
Well, he didn't hit me.
Well, all right, I know he didn't hit you. But now you were standing there arguing with somebody. You say you don't know who he is, you don't know who he looked like, you don't know anything. He just hit you. Why?
I think I'm running out on him too far.
For what?
I don't know why. You know, we're social for fellows.
What happened?
Okay, Mr. Wallace, look.
Come. Oh, you can come with me.
Going in there with her right now. What can you do like this?
People fail to understand that it's the times that we are living in now because of the decisions of the Supreme Court, and then of course all these here, these here minority groups rebelling, and the majority of the people are frustrated to some degree.
Policeman goes down the street and tries to make an arrest. Well, there's 15 people that are ready to jump on him.
In the situation at 14th and Euclid, that Mrs. Haskins had already backed me down the steps and back out onto the sidewalk and into the street. And all this time I hadn't drawn my service revolver, and I would ask people along the side of the street, will you help me? Will you help me? And nobody would help. They were all sitting there, they were clapping and laughing. And, you know, get him, and all this. And then after I did draw my service revolver, I still kept asking, will you help me? Will you help me? And no, they'd sit there and clap and they'll laugh. And the first shot, I shot the woman in the leg. The first shot hit her. That should have stopped her. No, it didn't. I kept going, and then finally I fell, and then hit my arm, and I shot her in the stomach then. But if they had helped when I asked them to, anyone, everything could have been avoided, because had someone helped, I would never have drawn the service revolver.
None of the people actually stepped in and said, look, Mrs. Haskins, this is an officer, lay down your knife and behave yourself. Nobody ever did that.
In that same situation, I can guarantee you one thing. If it ever happens again, I won't wait till I bust my arm before I shoot.
It would do no good for those of us who oppose the project in one form or another to come and just talk to ourselves. So we invited Mr. Shallow, Mr. Morgan over for you citizens who live in this community to express yourselves the way you feel it. And I just sort of point to people and ask for comment.
What confuses me is that how in the hell can you do in 1 or 2 days what the FBI Academy, the Secret Service, and all of this morass of travail that the Metropolitan Police go through for their training? How can you act as a panacea when they have failed? Now, both of you can wrestle with that, and I'm going to yield the floor to my brothers and sisters.
In the training program, we will offer 300 hours of training. This project intends to do something that has not been done in any city in the United States.
In other words, the 13th Precinct police officers are already in this program, in training, in orientation, and being paid from the grant?
That's right.
Who is orienting them?
Well, the staff is telling them about the project at the beginning. Incidentally, neither Dr. Raymer nor myself have ever been police officers.
I believe your background, though, is in urban psychology or dealing with police problems in the so-called ghetto.
No, I'm not a specialist on ghetto problems, so-called ghetto. I don't know what a ghetto is, but I'm not a specialist.
Were you influential in working with the Presidential Committee on Crime and Inner City?
I was third in charge of the Kerner Commission. That's the riot commission.
Oh, where did that take place? In the suburbia, Mr. Shello?
No, that did not. Have you read the Kerner Commission report?
The first thing he should have did, as he speak about the criteria, that's what you got to do. Go down and get the soul people, the people who knows what it's like or what these people's frustration is. Believe me, brother, you have directed wrong.
This is our third time to assemble. I'm saying to these messengers, if the leprechaun had the taste of watermelon in his mouth, he would not be wanting to sell us a political package loaded with substitutes, but perhaps suggest a design and installation of a circle at 14th and U, the bronze statue of Martin Luther King looking south. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There it is. Deal with it. Thank you.
I'm speaking for a whole lot of people in this community who have supported me in my efforts to sabotage or stop the model precinct project.
You asked, number one, that someone be placed in charge of Dr. Shallow. Is that correct? You asked that the police training be stopped. Is that correct? Right. It has stopped. Yes, sir. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Now, all right, now, I mean, where do we go from here?
There's no police training going on. There's no police training going on. What?
The fact is, we are at war against the model precinct project, which means I violated every statute of law by taking your propaganda and giving it out to the community. And still they reject it. Now, what else you want me to do?
Well, that's why we gave it to you. But we're saying let them reject it by a popular ballot.
It will not work.
Give the people the right to speak themselves. That's all we...
We're trying to tell you we're on the same side.
I frankly think that if you guys hadn't prevented us from getting an election, we'd have a board in existence right now. But unfortunately, we didn't have a board. Unfortunately, we've been sort of bogged down for the last month.
Mr. Barry's office, may I help you?
We're not going to pay federal excise tax, right?
Well, to get it back?
I don't think we are.
Get it back being a government agency.
Yeah.
Is Mrs. Harrison? This is Marion. Who's this? Is she coming in today? Is Walter Washington in?
Because of constant struggling and agitation, on February 19th, the election of a rubber stamp board was stopped by citizens. We brought the government to agree that the elected citizen board will have complete control over the budget and spending of monies for all programs relating to the community aspects of the project. The citizen board will have complete control over hiring and operations of staff employed to work with the project, except as may otherwise be delegated by the board to other persons. At that point, an election process will be set up that will, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, have elected neighborhood board. As I said earlier, this is a people's victory, a victory for community control. Now, as to our specific plans.
In this letter to the mayor of April 24th, the 5 demands. Is this really another project? Are we talking about another project? Does it depart that much from the conditions that were set down in the grant itself?
Don't know really what is meant by them.
Control over the staff, the hiring, and I assume the firing of the staff as well. What do we got?
Get rid of one of us, we have the right of appeal right on up into the courts.
Do you feel that
if we met these demands, that they would come up again with further demands?
That's a good
question. Those demands aren't substantially different from the kind of citizen input that should be in the police department from the very outset.
Time through this project for a complete push on citizens' control. I don't think this is the proper vehicle.
That's a sort of a political reality, if you will.
Well, that's why timing is so important. Yeah. That's why timing need be considered with what we're doing here.
This meeting was called to discuss the procedures for the election of the board.
You know, I served many months to try to get a better model precinct, meaning one that is more relevant to the black community. If these people are set up to do this thing for the black community, then why are they challenged before they get the job done?
Who are these people that are elected to this board, and I want to see them right now if they're here? Where is they at? I want all of them to stand up.
I want to move this agenda, Madam Chairman.
I want my answer.
I am not going to run over anybody, Mr. Jones. This man has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all be ladies and gentlemen. And I hope we can have citizens' participation without having to use profane and vulgar language.
You're going to deal with it. You're dealing with it.
Thompson, how are you?
Hi, Mr. Morgan.
Good to see you. Oh, Monsignor. Oh, you're there. Good. Mighty good to see you. You want to go right in.
You have the right.
Yeah, you got the right. Take that too, and you didn't get in it.
No, I don't understand that.
The young man that put the card right there.
Yes.
He could come in. Young man.
Well,
I know we close his store.
All right. Mr. Berry may be permitted as an individual. Okay?
It's 2:30.
Okay, that's plenty of time. Okay. Ask Mr. Berry to come in. Ask Mr. Berry to come in.
Go right in if you like.
How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Number one, this project is supposed to be for the citizens of the 3rd District. Now, I think it's unfair for Mr. Duncan and Mr. Shallow to select the people to come here. I know at least 10 or 15 organizations and people who have not gotten an invitation to come here. I think that's unfair.
This is by invitation only. I don't have a copy.
Mr. Rollock, gentlemen.
Excuse me. Yeah, all right.
Mr. Rollock.
Let the man back. Stop fucking with him.
If you look, don't you look what you're
Hey, hold it. Back. That's the kind of meeting you got going on in here. And you folks are supposed to be protecting the citizens. You ain't doing shit.
We can conduct our own meeting in the 3rd District. And I live in the 3rd District. I live in the 3rd District. See, you dig it? I work in the 3rd District. Dig it? And I deserve, the people out there live there deserve the right to be here, and they're going to come in here as long as I'm in here. And ain't nobody going to put me out either.
Don't push me.
Oh,
you gonna make me late, man. You better watch. Don't deal with it, man. Go ahead in there and break up that simple ass meeting.
We don't need the police
We
here.
don't need all the police out.
And we'll have order in this meeting. We'll have order. No, we'll have order.
We need them.
Every meeting you've been to, order, right? Wait, hold it. Every meeting that we have called, every meeting we have called has been ordered. Everybody. What your crowd?
Get up.
The issue is whether people outside can come in. The issue is whether people outside can come in.
Order.
So what?
To order.
Bang again. It is order. We want the people outside, inside. That's all. No, I'm going to stay in here where I was permitted.
It is not fair to let a crowd out, because they're all a crowd from one organization, to pack the meeting.
The problem is predominantly one of protection. Will you be quiet? I listen to you. It's one of protection for people and one of services. Right. Can I talk? Listen. We listen to you.
Meeting now adjourned.
Yeah, they're putting everybody out. See that what they're doing? They're putting everybody out right here. See that? Let's go down to the Y, everybody, and have a meeting.
The meeting's over.
Sergeant.
The meeting's over, I said. Go ahead and
Touch me arrested.
Well, you're not going to walk.
Don't walk through me. I'm not moving.
I don't think you're strong as I am. And I believe that. I'm tired. I believe it from my heart. I ain't gonna harm you if you don't harm me. I ain't gonna touch you if you don't touch me. Believe that, brother.
North Shoulder. Sergeant Ingram on 2633. 10-4.
Right. How bad is it? Whip that shit off. So today what you saw was some of us raising questions of who's going to control the project. We told Robert Shallow and Charlie Duncan that they couldn't on their own come into our community and do what they wanted to do. OEO, at some point, is going to have to get tired of the project going on without any board. They got to do that. For those of you all that are new, it has taken us 15 months to go this far, and we've learned a lot. So a lot of what you might be thinking, a lot of questions you might have and not quite answered, just rest assured that we are working from experience, and we're going to do everything we can to protect the interests of all citizens at all times, that you have to sort of learn with us as you go and sort of trust that we're going to move and keep the thing going.
Revolution has come. Time to pick up the gun. Revolution has come.
Jailhouse.
Time to pick up the gun.
Work in the jailhouse, man.
Mama
hog and daddy hog was sliding around and came up with a pig.
Pick up the gun. Revolution has come. Time to pick up the gun. Revolution has come. Time to pick up the gun.
Hard you try, you can't stop me now. Oi. Say it loud. No matter how hard you try, you can't stop me now. Oi. Say it loud. Power to the people. Say it loud.
I hope that my resignation will make it possible to have a clean election. I'm a white man, and I've learned through my upbringing to have derogatory attitudes about blacks, and it's in me. It's deep in me, just as it is in many of my fellow whites. Just as distrust and perhaps hatred of whites is so deeply ingrained in many blacks, and it's a sickness. Racism is a sickness. And it's like it's a chronic illness. It's like malaria or diabetes. You never shake it. You never can get rid of it throughout your entire life. But you got to have an antidote for it. You have to have some kind of control for it.
February 7th for Roosevelt King, who will fight for you all the way to the top.
How y'all brothers doing today? Brother wants you to come on out and vote tomorrow now, in our election. All right.
We have people of various and sundry types running. We have the whites and the blacks and the Spanish, the poor and the youth.
I think, first of all, we should recognize that everybody is opposed to crime.
What we really want is a police force that is our friend, but also our protector.
This is just a beginning step. And I hope the citizens don't think that we are going to be miracle workers, that we're going to solve all the problems of the third district. We ain't going to do it with this board or with 5 other boards.
I was born in the war, and I'm a graduate of the Morgan School down the hill. My children went to this school at one time a number of years ago.
I was on the platform Sunday night with my opponent. I don't see him here tonight. He's here. Is he here? Well.
I can't promise I'm coming.
No.
Because I have to go to take my wife to work.
And these are the things we are trying to get rid of. Hate, anger, crime.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Would you like to let me explain to you about the project, or maybe some other time? Okay, thank you.
I want to serve. I like this community. Thank you.
Go get your parents' dog, please.
First of all, you have to register. Wait a minute. Sign right there. Then I hear Roosevelt. His name called.
No, Roosevelt. That's right.
I think this is tremendously exciting. Which way do we go?
Thank you.
Okay.
You have an approval. What do you mean, like identification? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is what? I know.
Yeah, I'm sure that was one of my pants, but I'm retired. I'm trying to see what I brought in my pants with me.
Right. Let me know if I can help you.
You have to use it. Where's the ballot box?
Ballot box here, I'll take it. Okay, thank you very much. That is the ballots are those that are printed on the ballot.
I tore that one myself.
Counting in Ward 3.
We're not counting Ward 3 at the moment.
After we get these lined up, we'll get rid of the tally sheet.
2, 23, 24, 25, 26.
Have that are completed. Send those out of the way.
Law. Barry.
There are some things we ought to start talking about. I think we've gotten a green light to go forth and propose anything we want to, and to have broad latitude in terms of how we influence this project. And I think we'll take advantage of it while we can, because I think that at some point we might not be able to. But I do think that there are two things that just have to happen. We really need that initial program committee to start jotting down some ideas for us to consider. And we desperately need, on this Saturday, to meet and adopt a structure of some kind so we can start moving.
The board, through the 5 standing committees, will present a proposal. You have your Public Relations Committee, you have your Police Procedures Committee, your Police Training Committee, your Community Involvement Committee, your Community Actions Committee, and your Personnel Committee. If the board accepts it, then the proposal, along with the proposed budget and the number of persons that will be needed, if necessary, to institute the project, goes to OEO. And we do have enough money budgeted to go into it. We then begin operation on it. Now, whether this will mean all of these programs or just some of them, again, only time will tell.
Officers, I've been assigned to Scout 94 for this evening, 4 to midnight shift. May I have your last name and badge number, please?
P. Lindsay, 3761.
J. Valenti, badge number is 2218.
You got 90, check for signal 9, 1405 Gerard, Northwest, 1619. Simple. EMS there is there. You got 91. Just know you're calling auto. Hey, it's trouble.
So why don't you pull over and let her get off? And what did you do?
I pull right on, I'll come right on.
Block.
She live right here.
You got a ticket for not having your headgear on. So if you want to ride anybody, you better buy yourself another helmet.
How much it cost?
I have no idea. You have to go to the station. The Citizens Board determined that one of the things they needed to do is to recruit more local people into the police departments. The 3rd district is been over 70% black, but yet the white applicants you have up from the fields of North Carolina and whatnot. The whole aim of it, again, is to get more inner-city young men into this police department and change its complexion, perhaps, as well as its way of operating. That may take years, but at least we're making a start.
So, there I am. If I want a good life, I should want a wife, children, and that's a real good reason for becoming a policeman. Wow.
approximately 7 p.m., they were completely burned out. They lost everything.
You are the mother of 10 children?
Yes.
And 5 months ago, you just lost your husband. Is this right?
Yes.
See. Do you have any idea how the fire started?
Yes, the fireman said that gasoline was all around, going all over the furniture.
Mr. Wiggins, were you there at the time?
No, at the time I was attending traffic school, but I'm sure that I know who had this done, but I'm not sure who did it for.
Would you rather have a smaller pack or lighter?
No, you put something there, didn't you, for me?
This is milk for me, because I saw that on the list at the park. Well, what about some corn?
There's, like, if you want me to help you do something a little later on this evening, then what I'll do, I'll just stop by and let me know. And I don't have anything in particular to do this evening, okay? All right?
The people in the community are complimenting you. There's no sham. We know that we're doing a good job, but suppose, you know, like at the end of April, the fund's in. Ain't no more money. What are we going to do if, you know, like if they don't fund us? Anybody want to react to that question? We got all the necessary criteria for this being a meaningful project, a successful program. So I don't see no way possible that it could really end.
To me, it was a test thing to see what we were capable of doing and what we weren't. I want to look forward to it, but that's like everything else, you know.
You know, a lot of us, man, have been into things like hustling or doing other type of, you know, illegal activities to exist. And this job right here is taking us away from that, where we don't have to go through them type of change, you know. So I think if they took this program away, they could also be putting crimes back in the streets.
So I think the program, you know, somebody owes us that much, you know, to refine the program.
Well, everybody likes to pat themselves on the back, but I really think we're together, man.
We, the Lord and Youth Center Drama Company, has the pleasure of presenting to you the portrayal of one of the most deadly and influential enemies of our community, King Harold.
Want to buy some dope? I want some dope. Hey, Justin.
Child, where my works at, man?
Jack, the dope is beautiful.
Man, where my works at, then, Child? What my works you got in your arm?
Man, be easy, Jack. The dope is good.
You weren't acting like that a minute ago.
I was sick a minute ago, Jack.
You gonna sell that kid that dope, man?
And then the dope gonna make him slick. He don't want to go to school. He don't want to work.
Child, that kid in the 6th grade, child, look at his books, man. And you gonna get that kid that.
Hey, Shawty. Hey, Jesse, give me some salt and water. Man, it fell out.
What? Wait a minute, man.
Fell out.
How many times you cut that dope?
Man, the dope is good, man. The king shit down.
Hey,
Hey, man, do something, man. It's hard not beating. I say it's hard not beating. Do something. I don't know. It's hard not beating. Don't leave me by myself,
Child,
please.
we all right, child.
Please don't leave me.
But I don't want no fella beat, child. I can't be able to.
Miss Andrea Jones has been promoted from a GS3 to a 4. Grace Below has been reassigned as administrative aide to the staff. Leon Zayos to the citizen board, which is us.
All right. Any more questions?
I'm not on the board. I'm not on any of these committees. This is about the upteenth meeting I've been to, and I've noticed that all of these meetings are taken up by bureaucratic procedures and Robert's Rules of Order. And I noticed another thing. It seems like the black people here are scared to say anything. I don't know that one Robert's Rules of Order, one board meeting has ever stopped a policeman's bullet or a policeman's club from beating the hell out of a black person. Nothing is going to take place until black people get up off their ass in these meetings and begin to ask some relevant questions about this operation.
All this jive and lying is only going to lead to frustrations in the damn street, and you can't keep on this line and what you can see, all this jive. Ain't nobody doing jive. Just one moment. I promise promised that every meeting that I'm speaking, and I can speak. Every meeting. You can't tell me to sit down, fella. No, you can't tell me to sit down.
Mrs. Duff will give her report. Mrs.
Right. That's right. PPC. I understand where you're coming from. You understand where I'm coming from. Whenever. Right. Yes, right, yes. Just one second. That's right. Wait a minute. This isn't be recognized for I don't remember.
We wish to welcome you on behalf of the Pilot District Board to our fourth in a series of meetings involving business in the 3rd District. Question, please.
We are in a section where people goes right by, and often youngsters will try the door. Often they will come to use the telephone.
I have been wondering if there wasn't something that the police department could do to keep them moving.
Why not say, I don't care to be interviewed, but there are a number of men hanging in front of a such a place, and they're obstructing business. We'll come.
It seemed to me that it was a more deterrent when they were walking the beat and their presence was felt in the community where I was born and raised right here in Washington. All on 8th Street, all hours of night, walking up down the street, shaking doors. But I don't ever see them in my area.
If you want to do something, you have to start now. Can y'all start now? You know, y'all, everybody complaining about the 14th Street area, and I don't see nothing done. Can you start now on the police problem?
We're like quasi-soldiers. We obey orders. We're told what to do when we do it.
As we say, when to start to move on the race problem, to start to move on the drug problem. With intelligence, whether you're talking about drug traffic or drug addicts.
This was set up in the courts and through the district government. The police obey orders. If they come up with a thing that said, police will, when picking up a narcotic user, and it was committed no other crime, and we take them down there.
I don't agree with that thing that it has to start from the top. It can start with 1 or 2 and 3 individuals.
It's true that that you feel that the police also would welcome these things if they knew that they were available. It's a two-way street.
If they knew what they were available.
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that you're here and our having been here, that the police are here, and that we're not in a confrontation, but it's something where we're all learning. I learned from what you've had to say here, and I hope that somehow we have to. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you.
I'm good.
Very good. Very good.
Top of my son. Anytime we can get together again, you know, and the other things, you know, so we get them.
Glad to have you all, son.
What would have been the best input to the community? Now, this is what was done, and this is the policy that's used. Any vacancy that occurs, we search from within, we try to find a person from within, we stretch it in so far as is humanly possible to put that person in that position.
You got to have a staff to work with, and right now your staff are going in different directions. I like to hear from some other board members. They think they can run this program without a staff. You don't have a staff.
It seems to me that we're just repeating because you weren't here. You're repeating something that we've spent a lot of time on.
I know every meeting you spend a lot of time.
I just got here, but I don't know what the discussion's all about, but none of us on the board, and certainly Mr. Landers, is not satisfied with a lot of the things that are happening. I'm sure that Mr. Landers will sit down with anybody to discuss ways of improving. But see, unless you do that, it seems to me you're being unfair to the community, and you're being unfair to those who have sat down and tried.
But in my business or any other business, when things are not going right, staff is not going right, you start at the top. You don't start at the bottom.
What do you first do?
Trial and error. So
what do you first do?
Error, then you fire. That's all.
I know. But it's not done like that.
You might dress it up some, but
you're not going to dress it up at all. You're going to take a spade as a spade, that's all.
My only concern is not to defend anybody, but to talk about a process. And the project expires April 30th. Maybe it ought to just die if people feel that bad about it. I sure don't want to spend no more goddamn time down here. So we have to decide whether or not the project is worth programming to try to continue. And if we're not going to be programmed to continue after April 30th, I think we ought to just amble along and get through and go on home.
Her? I added that difference to this and came up with this.
What is this figure here?
That'll be our total. 68.
Check it on your tape.
All righty.
Don't forget the 10 cents. Good enough at the end.
Uh-oh. So now, this should come to the total of those three. But, so we have to add on to here what's left off.
This
What is left?
wrong.
This is wrong as it stands now, yes.
Wrong figure-wise.
Here this came to the board, for the board to make a recommendation to the mayor to submit this to OEO. Is that true or false?
That is true.
Then I'm saying that here the staff work in this thing is done by a bunch of chumps. Don't we have any air machines in here? Or we need to bring one out here right now. We're going to need that. There's some serious problems involved in this program. You defeat it before you start, just on your math alone.
I was asked for a figure, and I had the figures available.
Were you authorized to give this figure
I
for
am
me?
the director of this project, yes.
But you're not in charge of this
I
project
am
per
in
se.
charge of this project.
I thought the board members were in
The
charge.
board sets policy. I am in charge of the administrative operations of this project. If the board tells me what it wants to do, I carry it out.
Hey,
This is
now,
my job.
right there.
Carry it out.
Right there. The
A
board
part
tells
of
you
it-
what to
A part
do.
of it is the budget.
Right there,
And
back
I can
up.
now talk to you.
Back up. Hey, back up. The board tells you what to do.
The board tells me
Right.
what.
Okay, now that's all I want to hear. That's all I want to hear.
This will elucidate it. May I ask you, Mr. Landis, has this particular program, the $2 million program, been discussed with the mayor?
No, sir.
We've got
It's being discussed now.
So you took it on your own to recommend a budget to the mayor?
I did not submit a budget, a figure, Mr. Murphy. We can both play those games in words. I wasn't here, Mr. Murphy. You were. You were a part of it.
Goddamn, don't tell me I was a part of any damn preparation of submitting some board for less the amount that we received initially and double the damn amount. This is the failure of most businesses coming from a business position. How are we going to do anything undercapitalized? How can we function here?
This is what happened.
According to the mayor, I got, look.
I know what do you want to bet on? If you don't know what you're talking about, sit down and don't be talking to me in front of these people about it.
Talk to the mayor.
And the man knows it now. And if he said he didn't know anything about it when you mentioned it to him, the man knows it now.
What's wrong? We ain't never said this. Right damn project, running the damn ground.
I mean, don't do that. You have had people smile in your face and tell you that they were with you. They turned right around and put you in the back. And these little board members. You're an educated man, honey. You got know how you're supposed to do that. You don't have to stoop to that. Don't make yourself comfortable. You don't have to stoop to that. Don't stoop. You're a professional man. Hold up your dignity. You can do it. Retain your cool. Retain your cool. You're a dedicated man. You've done a good job. Retain your cool.
You never can tell what will happen between now and Thursday. You know, that's a week away.
You've had very poor liaison.
I agree with you. It's got to reach a point that whether I remain there as director or go, or whether anyone else comes, there's got to be a understanding as to what the board can do, what the director should do, where they cleave and where they come together.
Your parliamentary procedure is very lax. That Donnybrook at the last Thursday night meeting was ridiculous. It was disrespectful.
The mayor's whole philosophy is that he does not want any controversy. He wants to keep things down. And if it means bearing the whole brunt of it up there, this is what he wants me to do.
All you're asking is for a person to come in and work with them and explain something. Even the mayor should be able to understand that.
The mayor doesn't like to disturb the waters unless they completely engulf him. You know that.
Cool.
No.
Well, it's 8:30, half hour late, so I'll call the meeting to order. And Mrs. Duff, our chaplain, will you give the prayer, please?
I'm going to give us this more knowledge, more wisdom, more understanding,
So we will be able to deal with the issues that confront us in making this project a success. Amen.
If I remember correctly, we were told to come.
Can we take a moment, I think?
That's our project.
It was 2 weeks ago that we were at the same place where we alerted the citizens to a menace that was getting ready to plague our community in terms of the police department indicating that they were going to fingerprint and mug all persons that were arrested for misdemeanors and for some traffic offenses. Now, we're not opposed to pictures being taken of people who committed felonies, but we think that 90% of the people that are arrested in Washington, D.C. are black people.
Hey, man, why don't you go back and try that again?
Y'all, good job, man.
We just finished meeting with Chief Wilson, and I think everybody ought to understand that our position earlier, 2 weeks ago, was that we were opposed to the fingerprinting of people that were arrested for misdemeanors, and we've been discussing that for the last hour and a half, and we have not gotten a conclusiveness as to whether or not it will continue in the 3rd District.
What are they trying to accomplish? Or what is the purpose of that?
But you have to ask the police department what they're trying to accomplish. I think we're just giving our position, and the chief can give his position.
Aren't citizens supposed to have an input into the way the police station is operated?
If it had not been for the Pilot District project and our vigilance, this thing would have gone through. So I think everybody ought to understand this is the kind of thing that the project stands for. This is the kind of thing that the project wants to do because we're there to serve the community. And I think that this shows the strength and the success of that kind of project. And I think that the chief can speak for himself, but he said that in general he supports the project and the mayor supports the project, and that we're going to continue to try to get some money for it.
Thank you very much.
Be hitting people in the head.
Isn't that something?
Blood in our hallway. Trash, stink. Got dogs in our building.
And that's the kind of life you got to live, right?
People stop fires right on.
We kill each other, don't we?
Right on.
So we got to try to create some love and some feeling in our community for ourselves, right? What do you think about the police?
There ain't nothing but pigs, man. Like, when I was going up looking for my father, man, like, they picked me up just because I wasn't in school and shit like that. So I said, man, what y'all gonna do with me?
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm gonna take you to the pig pen. I said, no, you ain't. You gonna take me to my aunt, buddy. So he said, all right. So I said, man, y'all ain't nothing but pigs. Y'all know that? I told them right to their face. Then they come up here.
So it's my pleasure now to introduce Tom Sherwood, reporter for News 4, specializing in politics and D.C. government. Tom?
After seeing that film, I think I should be smoking. Good Lord. Well, let's bring the panel right up and get started on this. This is very interesting. Susan Meehan, a community activist and agitator. Still going. Frank Smith, and our interim, I don't like the word interim, but the D.C. Police Chief, Peter Newsham. Chief, you're next to Susan. Okay.
That's weird.
Yeah, you're good. Thank everybody for coming tonight. That's an extraordinary film for a variety of reasons other than the smoking. And so I want to thank Tom Nastak for starting this program. We're just going to talk a little bit about with the people here about what we just saw, and then we want your questions. You can see to your left and right, there's a mic over there. We want to hear your question, not any speeches. That goes for the panel. And so let's just start it here. You have their IDs and what you can read about them, and I think we'll get right to the programs. And I want to start with Frank Smith. You came to Washington in 1968, I think you told me.
Sure did.
He's from Noonan, Georgia. I won't hold it against him. I'm from Atlanta.
Atlanta's a suburb of Noonan.
That's, without Atlanta, Georgia would be Alabama. But Frank Smith, your reaction to that film, just if you give us a summary reaction to the film.
Well, Tom, as you said, I moved here in January of 1968, and then, of course, you all know Dr. King was assassinated in the riots in April. So I watched the city go up in smoke, and I've said before, for a minute, I thought I'd made a bad decision to leave Mississippi to come to Washington. But later I realized that if I was going to stay here, I need to try to do something to make it better. First of all, that's my first reaction. And secondly, of course, many of the characters in that movie are people that I got to know over the years, worked with, served with, did Orange Hat patrol with, represented that district on the city council for years. And then thirdly, the issue of police brutality, which is dogging us today with Black Lives Matter and others, has been around for all these many years. It was around during the days of the civil rights movement. We took on the issues of the back of the bus and the segregation and integrating schools, but we never got around to that issue, especially in the cities, of police brutality. And it's something that this whole movie was about. That's the underlying issue that the community was trying to deal with at the time. We're still wrestling with it.
50 years.
Yep.
Plus.
Still wrestling with it.
All right. And Susan, I want to talk to you. You've been on the city streets. You've been in organizations. You've been before the D.C. Council more times than you probably want to count. You've been in political campaigns. You simply have been there. Give us your summary reaction to what you just saw.
It's interesting because my remembrance of the Pilot District project was a bit different. Number one, we ended up liking each other. As wide and
Are you saying the media got it wrong again? I can't believe I'm leaving. Yeah. No, that's good. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we really did. I remember 1 year after the project was started, we decided we were going to have a banquet at the Pitts Motor Hotel, which was the only place in the 3rd District that was available. We invited the chiefs of police, came in. We shared the room with another group that turned out to be a group of persons very dressed up, and eventually we realized they were electing their Queen of the Year, which the police noticed when we saw them sort of reaching for their truncheons. But it turned out, which they didn't have, it turned out very well, I think. Our problems were as much with the people who ran the Pilot District project. I saw 2 of 3 directors of the Pilot District project in the movie, and 2 of them did things that should have landed them on the front page of the Washington Post and not what you'd want to read.
Do you think that film, just as Mr. Smith said, captured the feeling of fear and distrust of the police department?
Well, I think that part was absolutely true. When the Pilot District project, the idea came up, this was before home rule, and we were ruled by, the person who headed it up was not called the police chief, it was called the police community relations director, and he reported to the White House and he reported to Congress. They were the people who made all the decisions about the way policing should be done in this city, and it wasn't done well. The people were treated genuinely badly, and we deserve to have something like the Pilot District Project come in and try and straighten things out.
Okay. Now, Chief Newsom, I believe you are the youngest person on the panel. I hesitate to ask you how old you were in 1968 and 1970. Could you give us a general idea?
I was born in 1964, so I was...
the year I graduated from high school. Very good.
And so I won't even pretend for a second to know more about this project than my distinguished guests to my right and to my left. I found the film fascinating, historically fascinating. It seemed like the emotion that the different sides had were so strong that there was an inability to collaborate. That's at least the way it was portrayed. And it was nice to hear you give a different perspective from what you saw when you participated. I don't know if they had the right people in the room all the time. I saw the police in a couple of the scenes. You saw police there. Most of the film, when you saw the police, they were in an adversarial posture as opposed to a collaborative posture. And that's something that we work on every single day, is to be collaborative. And it's interesting that you say that, the police made the rules. The community was completely opposed to the way that the police were operating. And there was absolutely no input from the community. And the emotions on each side made it almost made it impossible for them to even pick a precinct where to begin the project. So to me, it was fascinating. From a historical perspective, to see some of the images from those days, and I look at the uniforms and the police officers.
In the cars.
In the cars, yes. And I understand, Tom, you had a car like that at one point.
I had a couple of them, along with the tickets. Do you think that, we're going to get into the modern era now, but do you think that's a film that maybe the Police Training Academy might show people just to give some history?
I think that it is. I think that that's something, we have to understand our history. And, obviously we do a little bit better now collaborating with our community before we implement changes on the police department. But by no stretch of the imagination do we believe that there's not a distrust of the police in our communities. Some of the communities that we serve are very distrustful of the police. And so, for us, it's a constant effort to build trust. And the most difficult thing about building trust is you can work on it, you can work on it, you can work on it, and then once you break it, you're back to square one. And the images that we're seeing across the country right now of police officers is breaking that trust. It's making it worse. And so we just got to roll up our sleeves and work that much harder to continue to build that trust.
We're going to get to that one moment. I want to talk to Susan. Susan sent some notes to Tom Nastek and me, and I read them. And she talked about the police pilot project and what it did do. She said it spawned 5 police chiefs who grew out of that effort. It opened women to all levels of police jobs where they had not been around. That it encouraged study groups to encourage young black military veterans to come, or to at least apply to become police officers. That it sparked better ride-along programs. You saw a little of that in the movie, in the communities. It sparked the self-determination effort in this city for people to say that we as American citizens can control our own destiny. Again, another issue that has not quite come to fruition. And it stopped what was interesting, the routine dispersal of blacks gathered on the street. For those of us who now live, you've heard about this in some cases, but Susan, 50 years later, we still hear about police rousting people on the street. We still see that. Where are we now after 50 plus years? Where do you see us?
I see us as better than we were we have a lot that we need to keep on learning. The problem with the arresting, the rollers.
So we don't use anymore, the rollers.
That's right. That was a term from that time. But I think that has continued to some degree. But we have more chance to look at the police and work with them. I think that one of the most useful things that we did in the PDP was to set up and continue to this day a ride-along program. It was before we had video cameras to record what the police were doing. We sent people in the cars to ride along with the police. At the same time, the community was learning how difficult it was to be a police officer, and I think they gained some real respect for what the officers were doing when the officers could see a great deal more than could the average citizen.
Mr. Smith, you're an older African-American man. You heard Charles Cassell in the movie. He's the man who said he could walk out that door and be shot. Do you feel that way even now?
Well, Tom, not so much for myself, but you know, I came here from picking up my 12-year-old granddaughter, and I have a 17-year-old grandson who just started driving, went on his first date last weekend. And I don't fear so much for myself, but I do fear for this tall, young, handsome scholar who could, in a day, get in an encounter. So,
have you had the conversation with him?
I have had the conversation. I have it with him all the time.
And for those who might know, the conversation is African-American parents or family members or friends having the conversation with young people to say, be careful out there.
Right, and really, so, and I do say to myself, I shouldn't be having this. You know, I spent 6 years in Mississippi in the Civil Rights Movement, all these years here in the government in Washington. We should be past that now, but we aren't. And so it's an issue that is still before us. And but I want to say a couple of things about the D.C. Police Department. First of all, one of my pride things that I did was I started a program to get police officers to live in the district and to be able to take their police cars home with them. At the time I wrote the bill, I talked to the mayor of New Orleans at a football game at one time. He told me that this is Mayor Mariel, the old man, not the son, the older one. And he said that in Louisiana, cops prided themselves, and they lived 3 zip codes away from the city. They didn't want to stay anywhere near the city. And I think this is something that the country really has realized. Most of our officers don't live in the areas where they police. They live someplace else. And they live far away in our cases, away. And so the government has to have a policy of getting more people. And that was talked about in this third district. First of all, I think we've done a better job at that now than we've done then. Not good enough, but a better job.
Maybe we could do something better about the affordability of housing in the district.
Well, you know, the bill that I wrote actually allowed them to buy houses they could buy houses in the homestead program for $250 a piece, and the government gave them the first $10,000 to fix it up well. We knew that too. And they could take their cruiser home with them, which is a big deal, because it means the city bought gas for them and they could drive the car around the neighborhood. So we need to do more of that. And and I heard the new mayor talk about that in a program about what she's going to do for the police department is try to get more of them living in the city.
And there's even going to be, the press conference hasn't been held yet, but I hope I'm not stepping on the announcement, but the mayor and the police department are going to align with, I think, Anacostia High School soon to do more of a police cadet program. Chief, tell us a little bit about that, then I'll come to Susan.
Yeah, that's accurate. They, you know, and you bring up a really good point, trying to get young people who live in the city. First, you got to want them to be the police. And I think that my responsibility, you know, as the leader of the agency is to present an image of a person that somebody wants to be. And I think I need to do that with everybody who works in the agency. I want young people to look at our police officers and say, I want to be like them. And frankly, right now, a lot of the kids that live in our city don't have that impression. And you know, I don't necessarily know if it's because of the Metropolitan Police Department, but a lot of it has to do with the images that we're seeing of police behavior. And the things like the take-home program that you started has been fantastic for for getting people to be interested in living in the city, our police officers living in the city. The mayor, as you know, has introduced legislation to expand our cadet program. The age of, and what the cadet program is essentially it's a job, and it's for people that, it used to be for people up to the age of 18, and she's extended that age limit. And you have a job as essentially a helper to the police, and you're working towards becoming a police officer. And right now you need 60 credits of college to become a police officer. And so that is paid for. Your college education is paid for. And extending the age gives an opportunity to young people who always wanted to go to college, may not have the means to go to college, and want to be police officers to participate in that program. So we are constantly giving thought to how to attract young people from the city to be on our police department, and it is important. You know, one of the difficult things for us right now, and you've all heard this, is that we are experiencing a retirement bubble. So we're losing a lot of people all the time, and we got to replace them quickly because we have to keep our numbers, you know, at a certain level. So if you don't have a pool of applicants that are coming from the city, you got to go somewhere else. So we've got us into that kind of tricky position.
Did you recognize 14th Street? Did you recognize the La Diplomate? There are 80 restaurants now, I think, on 14th Street. What were your thoughts when you looked at 14th Street in Euclid and the Pitts Motel was on, I can't remember the street between 14th and 15th. Champlain Street, just up from Florida Avenue, right?
No, it's not Belmont. It's Belmont.
What were your thoughts? Well, before the Reeves Center at 14th and U, what were you thinking when you saw those buildings, when you saw those empty storefronts, you saw the gates, and when you drive or walk up and down 14th Street now?
Well, you know, I was a council member for that ward for 16 years. So for 16 years, I had the responsibility of trying to figure out how to bring it back from those days after the riots. And that was one of the reasons why we built the African American Civil War Memorial and Museum there, so we could attract tourists from downtown to the street, spend some of their tourist dollars up there, and help with the revitalization of the area. So it took a long time to get it turned around, and we always knew it was going to change. We were always hoping it was going to change. We were praying for it to change. We didn't think it was going to change this fast.
Has it changed too much?
We didn't think it was going to change this fast.
Or this much, because the young men and women that the chief talked about who might want to be police officers, the people who are moving into 14th Street now are a whole different world.
Yeah. Look, I think he's absolutely right about this point about trying to find to make it more attractive for young African American men who want to be police officers, men and women. And I was, you know, my grandson, his grandfather was a pilot. I would like for him to go to the academy and become maybe a pilot or something. But he's not interested in any uniformed any uniformed professions. So we've got a long way to go with young black men who have been for many years now. Not only do they look down on people in uniform, but they also they get ridiculed themselves if they start talking about that as a career. So we got a lot of work to do there. But the heart of our justice system and the heart of our system of freedom and equality is that you're going to be patrolled by somebody who's your peer. You're going to be arrested by somebody that's a local person, and you're going to be tried by a jury of your peers. That's the heart of the system. And that whole thing has been turned on its head nationwide, really, because we've got people who have hostile toward the people that they police and don't want any parts of the
Susan get a word in here. And think of your questions, short questions. The microphones on each side of the room here. You have to go there so the audio equipment can pick up your short question. Susan.
I'm a Quaker representative to the Council of Churches. I'm the vice president of the Council of Churches here in Washington, and they're almost all black pastors who are members. They are losing their membership. When I think about 14th Street, I want it to be better than it was back in the Pilot District project days. But at the same time, I'm looking back and thinking there were people there who lived there for a very long time. And there was a sense of community that there isn't as much today, and I miss that. we used to sit outside.
Is that just because you've gotten old and you don't get out as much? That's the way I feel. I just don't get out as much, and so I don't have that same sense. It's more than that.
I'm out there a lot, and I think today we've gone a little far.
Okay.
I'd like to see the variety of people sitting out and talking to one another in the summertime, occasionally turning on the hydrants and having a little...
That'd be the fire chief, not the police
yes.
chief. You leaned in on him like he should be doing it. But what about you, Chief? You joined the force, I think, in 1989 also?
I did.
And so you've seen the extraordinary change in the city. What were your thoughts when you first joined the force as an officer? Where were you in the city? And now what do you think about what you saw there and what you see when you go on 14th Street now?
I mean, if you want to talk about the transformation in policing in the almost 27 years that I've been in policing, it's incredible the amount of changes that we've seen. We have progressed, and like you said, not fast enough. It's a shame that folks have to talk to their children about traffic stops with the police because their children are scared to be stopped by the police. You look at areas like 14th Street, you look at areas over there by National Stadium, the area where the Verizon Center, this city is completely different than it used to be. And that presents its own challenges for policing. And I think you touched on one of them is the affordability of having officers who live in some of those areas. So what we end up doing, on the Metropolitan Police Department, we're very proud of the fact that diversity-wise, our department reflects the diversity of the city. And we're very proud of that because there's a lot of agencies that don't have that across the country. But like we've been indicating up here, just because we reflect the diversity of our community, we don't necessarily have people who have lived in these neighborhoods in the community. That's one of the things we're trying to attract. And so you end up starting off a little bit behind because, and our officers do this, and they do it very well, is that they get into the neighborhoods and they begin to develop relationships with people in the community. But you're starting behind. If it's somebody that they already know, it's much easier than having to get to know somebody. And just geographically taking somebody out of a different state and placing them in the District of Columbia, there's a learning curve. There's a complete learning curve.
I forgot to do one, to make a quick point, I forgot one thing I wanted to ask you and Frank.
I wanted to say when the Pilot District project started, police knew nothing about the questions that the people in the community called them for all the time. I know that, and I started to keep a notebook of stuff that the police needed help in answering, and I ended up writing a book for the police and for the community on where to get help on almost anything. If you lived in Washington, I think that the police of today are much more knowledgeable about the community than they ever were in the past. And this
Also,
is much to be
we have
commended.
911 people who are not police officers who are, sometimes they don't know where they are. Somebody told me the other day, most of them are very good, I have to say, because I've had very good experience with them, but somebody had some incident near the the merry-go-round on the National Mall, and the 911 call taker said, well, what's the address? She says, I don't know, it's just a merry-go-round. I want to go very quickly, and I don't want a long story because they could take up the whole time. You saw Marion Barry as a community activist before he ran for any public office. Just your general thought about that. I don't want to hear the rest of the story because I know it. But just at that moment, what was he like? Can you give me one incident anecdote? It's not too long.
I thought he was terrific. I and the rest of the board all worked together to help him get elected, and I was glad that I did it, and I think that he served the city well.
Frank.
But, I've known Marion. We met each other in college. I was at Morehouse College. He was down in Tennessee, and so we met each other in the Civil Rights Movement and each moved to Washington, D.C. at different times, but then I served on the council while I was mayor. My first thought was that that when we ran for office, for him for mayor and myself for city council, John Wilson, David Clark, who you saw in that video also, we probably ran for office as probably the most qualified generation of people to ever run for office in this country, because we've been working at these issues of police brutality and community services and stuff before we went in there. And I think that Washington, D.C. had a great leap forward over the other cities in the country, and has progressed even today, developed the largest black middle class in the country.
Because of the Civil Rights Corps of a group of guys.
That's right, in Washington, D.C. And I think that was my thought, that here he was, this was long before he ever thought about running for office. He's out here fighting it out in the community as a leader.
You can read the whole story if you buy a book called Dream City that somebody wrote. But, I want to tell you one little story. Bill Rice is here, up here in the corner over there. He got a copy of part of this film, and I actually, in April of 2014, the same year that Mayor Barry died, I went to his office and I played it for him and did a story about it, which might be on our online. But he laughed at himself for being so aggressive. He smiled at some things. He got a little bit teary about some things. But Chief, he said one thing, that had he been able to do it over again, apart from any problems he had personally with his personal behavior, is that he would have been more aggressive of getting the police to be part of the community. That's the one thing he thought he failed in, that because he fought with them so much in some cases, he didn't bring the police and the community together better.
Yeah, I have to say, that was one of the most fascinating parts of the film, is to see Mr. Barry back in the day doing his thing, because I knew him a little later in his life, and we had a lot of interaction with him. And you saw, at least what I saw in the film, and you can agree or disagree, it was a leader of people, an excellent communicator. He was able to gain access to places that some others weren't, because he was respected and recognized in the community for that. So, I mean, that to me was fascinating to see.
I'd like to take some questions if you have some questions.
I have a question.
Okay. If you would like to identify yourself so we'll know who's...
Sure. I'm Abigail Woodward, and my mother was born here in D.C., and I'm from Atlanta, so there you go.
Well, speak as long as you like.
Well, thank you. First of all, I understand with the retirement bubble that y'all have to do recruiting from all over. And so the cohesion is going to be in the police as a group. And y'all need to be, looking out for each other's backs anyways. But what happens when you have a bad apple? I haven't seen the group, cull the bad apples. I've seen y'all protect the bad apples. And how can that change? And I had another question. What was it?
Well, why don't we let him answer that one while you're thinking?
Okay.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
Sure.
I have to say that's one of the things, as a police leader, that is really hurtful to us, because I don't see it in our agency, and of course where I sit it's a lot more difficult to see. I don't see our officers protecting the bad apples on the Metropolitan Police Department.
What's that called? The blue line? What is it?
They call it the thin blue line.
Yeah, right.
And this shroud of secrecy. I come from a very large family, and I have a number of nieces and nephews that are between the ages of 20 and 30, and I've had this dialogue with them. And they will say to me, when I discussing police issues, they'll be like, well, you're only saying that because you're a cop. You know what I mean? And nothing is further from the truth. When I see the things that we have seen recently across this nation, the behavior by some of the police people wearing uniforms, I'm just as disgusted as anybody else is. And that disgust is shared with the large majority of the police officers that work in the agency. I do not see a thin blue line. We, in the District of Columbia, operate under a microscope. There's not a thing that our officers can do that's not on videotape, and they know it. And so when we do see bad apples, we make every effort to correct their behavior, and if they're really bad, we make every effort to remove them from the force.
What is the training? You have a tremendous training academy. When you talk about community, if a person doesn't feel anything for a community, he or she may have nothing to do with it, just ride through it. Is it a major part of the training? Where does it fit? Is it a sidecar?
It's, you know, my philosophy on training is, you know, you bring a police officer and they're a very young person usually. You can hire them at all ages, but generally you're bringing a very young person and you have to train them a lot very quickly. And so you get them in there for pretty close to 8 or 9 months, and you give them, and there's a lot of different things you have to train them. And one of them is, and you emphasize this throughout the training, is that the number one thing that you're going to do, the cornerstone of your success, is going to be your relationship with the community. So that's emphasized all throughout the training. But they really don't know how to be a police officer until they go out there and they experience the job. And so that training, and you know, truth be told, doesn't end. It happens throughout your entire career. And that's our responsibility as police leaders, is to continue to emphasize when they do something that may have made us look bad in the images of the community, is to correct them and say, hey, listen, look how this looks, look how this makes our agency look. It doesn't make us look good. You got to do this a better way. So, you know, so I don't know if this properly answers your question, but you start them off just like anything else. They're an infant police officer when they come out of the academy. They're young people. And it's only through continued training and experience that you end up, at some point in their career, you end up with a good police officer.
And before, do the military veterans get involved? The ones you hire, are they better able, having been in a quasi-military organization?
Not really. You know, we have just as many, because you can either have 60 college credits or prior military service to serve as a police officer. Those are, if you have that, you can join. But there's no real differentiation as to which group, you know, you get the better cops from. They both have served us very well.
Susan?
Could I ask a question? Chief, the Police Advisory Board at this point does very little. It has no power. It can make recommendations, but the chief is in no way required to pay any attention at all. How about making that board, allowing that board to be a little bit stronger? I think it would benefit the way the police department is thought of in this city.
That was my second question, actually.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for sending it over through the minimum wage. Give me the lottery number after the program. Chief, it's a very good question.
Yeah, I think it is a
good
question, and I think it's important for me to let folks know that there is continuous community input into what we do. We have oversight by the council, who's elected by the community, and they take a very, very close look at what we do, a very close public look at what we do, and the community comes into the council hearings on a regular basis to give their input. I'm not saying that the Police Advisory Board is a bad idea, but I do want folks to know that we're scrutinized pretty closely by our communities. And if the community has an issue with the police, we learn about it very quickly.
Mr. Smith, do you have a comment on that? Some people, I used to like the 1st District police station there on M Street in Southwest. I think it's 1st District. And you would walk in, you could talk to the person at the counter, but now you go in, it's like you're going into a bank. They've got bulletproof glass there, and it just seemed to me one more step of removing the people from the police officers. I know that's so people can't come in and cause violence. But Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I think that there's no question about the fact that there is still a us against them mentality. And I think it cuts both ways. It's the community against the police, and the police against the community, too. And you see it played out nationwide in all of these cases.
Are cameras helping?
Yes, I think everything, yes. Because many of these atrocities would not have been brought to the forefront had it not been for these cameras. And I find it incredible that people are still shooting African-American men, even when they know the camera is running. Why are they doing that? Well, probably because they know nothing's going to happen to them. That they're not going to be prosecuted or anything like that. So this is an issue that's before us, that's as incredible. And as I said to you before, as a grandparent who has to have that conversation, not only have a conversation, but every day you got to think about the possibility that something might happen. I never worry about myself that much. I'm like Barry, I'm 74 years old, ain't nobody gonna shoot me. They didn't shoot me when I was in Mississippi in the Civil Rights Movement.
What about the cameras?
Running up and down these alleys.
Because the police union welcomed the cameras, and they're very new, so you don't have a lot of detail on them yet, but what can you tell us in the community about how the cameras are either helping or hurting?
I mean, it's an additional level of transparency, and I'm very proud of the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department for embracing the cameras. There are other police agencies that are having a lot of difficulty with their membership to get them to embrace the cameras. And actually, our leadership of our Fraternal Order of Police was more than willing to put the cameras on, and we're going to be one of the biggest, largest agencies by the end of this year to have cameras on all of our patrol officers.
We have a question over here. Thank you very much. If you'd like, you may identify yourself or just ask a question.
Hi, my name is Pam, and I have a question about inviting other members of the community, specifically the disabilities community. So there's enough, I call it stigma, of walking while black. But if you have a disability and you are of color, it maximizes your chances of attention being drawn to you. So I consider police officers, first responders. What kind of training do you give? The reason why I ask is because my daughter has anxiety disorder, and she had a panic attack. And they came with a paddy wagon, and they were taking my daughter to juvenile. I was the one that called for an ambulance for my daughter to get medical assistance. And the officer wanted to take my daughter, chain her in a paddy wagon, and take her down to juvenile. I had the foresight, because I practiced, to find out who the officer was in charge, to ask the officers who has experience dealing with disabilities, specifically autism and anxiety, and I bonded with those gentlemen and those ladies. I was able to get the therapist on the phone who talked to the officer in charge, and instead of taking her to juvie, they took her to the hospital, but they cuffed her ankles, they cuffed her, and they carried her in the wagon as if she committed a heinous crime. That was traumatic. Me asking, okay, who's gonna bring me to the hospital with her? They told me they couldn't help me. I said, no, 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 that's not how we do it. One of the cars has to escort me to the hospital. Jeez. And through talking with them and, remaining calm, and I was able to get that done. But what happens if I'm not there? Or what happens if the officers aren't given that training, which should be by default? Because
let's have the chief answer that question.
Right. I mean, you are my friend. You were here to serve and protect. So when I look at you, even if I have to remind you by saying thank you, I know that you're here for the betterment. But a lot of officers don't have that mindset. So what happens to our children when we are not there?
Let him answer the question.
I think, first of all, I want to apologize for your experience. That sounds like a horrible experience as a mother to have to see that with your own daughter. So on behalf of the agency, I want to apologize that you had to experience that. And you make some excellent points, and I think policing in general is advancing with regards to dealing with folks who have disabilities and mental health issues. And in the Metropolitan Police Department, one of the programs that we do have is we've trained crisis intervention officers that have specific skills for dealing with those issues. So we are beginning to train. We have a large number of officers that have that training, but really large scale thinking more. That's really not an intervention that a police officer should be involved in. And we are having conversations with the city. Mental health professionals should come and be dealing with that issue, because they're going to know that that putting on handcuffs is not the appropriate response to a young person who has some kind of a disability or a mental health issue. Right. Putting handcuffs, it may even exacerbate the situation. So those are the things we are looking at. With you personally, your experience should not have happened. And I would hope that maybe I can get your information later and we can look into it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Frank Smith, what does Black Lives Matter mean? Don't all lives matter? Don't blue lives matter? You've heard it. What is the argument tell people what does it mean for people?
Well, what it means to me is this, that these young people have been able to shine a light on some awful atrocities all around this country that we would never have known about if they had not gone out there and made us think about it. And being a veteran of the civil rights movement who had to do that back in the 60s, I identify with them. I'm glad they're around. Thank God there's somebody still out there doing it.
Oh, good. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I apologize for turning that direction.
I just want to say I'm a product of
Barbara,
Mary
could you ask you to step down to the mic a little closer, please?
Oh.
Thank you very much.
I worked with Marion Barry back in Pride days. So looking at the film was just, you know, a little backdrop of like, do I know these people? But but it was great. He was a great mayor, and I really enjoyed working with him in Pride. But I have a question for the interim chief. You said something about the cadet program in Anacostia. Could you speak a little bit on that? And will it be across the other wards in the city?
They're beginning it over at Anacostia High School, and it's a public service academy, so it's going to give young people that are inclined to do so or have an interest in policing to be able to get trained at the high school level. And then we're going to try and guide them if they continue the interest to join the cadet program and hopefully become police officers. So, and you know, you made a really good point. There may even be some kids that are interested in becoming police officers, but some of their peers will try and dissuade them from doing it because the stigma that is attached to policing. But I think if we get into the school, and we're going to start in Anacostia, so that's the beginning. If we start in Anacostia and we have some success, I think there's a good probability that we're going to expand it to some other places.
Okay,
good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sir, did you have a question? Yes, sir. Go. If you would just get the mic a little close to you so we'll be able to pick it up.
Yes. Good evening to all the panelists. My name is Ben, and I'm actually an author of a book on police violence. I did like the film very much, and the question I have, I can go to anyone on the panel, is that back in the day in the 60s, there were issues that led to police violence, and some of that have been addressed by community policing. Now, besides community policing, what other factors lead to police violence that are yet to be addressed, and how do you intend to address them?
I'm not sure I got the question exactly right, but police, maybe restate the question again. I think.
Yes, there are several factors that could lead to police violence. Now, one thing that has been addressed is community policing. You know, having police officers from the area to be in the police force. Now, besides that, what other factors lead to police violence that you know of, and what are you trying to do to address those issues?
Well, in order to make it's jobs, housing, it's a long list of things, whether it's mental health, it's everything.
Tom, community policing is not just having officers live in the neighborhood.
Right.
It's having officers get to know their community. We've been trying to get these officers out of the cars, walk around, and the heart of policing is this. If people aren't willing to give you information on what crime, to who did the crime, you watched that in the movie too, who are willing to give you, tell you what happened, you weren't there, the police officer wasn't there. The only person that was there was somebody in the neighborhood, and if those people don't talk to them, then they're not going to ever solve these crimes. They can't solve these crimes without the community. So, and if people don't trust them, they're not going to talk to them. So community policing is more, for me, it's more officers getting to know people in the community and bonding with them to the point where people are willing to talk to them and trust them with information, which they must give in order to solve these crimes.
Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, following up on that, it seems to me that there is one kind of policing that needs to be done in neighborhoods where people are living, and a different kind of policing that needs to go on in the downtown areas. I'd like to see the police out on the streets more in the residential areas, because that's where you need to get to know what a neighborhood is like, and you don't when you're strictly riding in a car.
Well, Chief, let's answer it. You have officers on beat patrols, bicycles, cars. What other, and you've got roughly 3,800 officers for the entire city? How do you spread them around?
Well, we do, and they're evenly distributed throughout the districts, and we try to get them because of the, this is something we've learned from the community, is that they want the officers to be out of the cars. They want them to be walking. They want them to be on the bikes and on the segways. One of the, practical aspects of policing is we do have to get around, and we have to get around quickly. So eliminating the cars altogether is not,
Not asking.
yeah, I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. Hopefully at some point, in my perfect world, we won't need to race from place to place because we won't have any violent crime.
But in our perfect world, we're out of time. So this is like a candidate forum. I apologize, we're out of time. If you ask a quick question, they can answer it in their summation minute.
Well, I think it's real quick. Our city's police department is the most important, but we live in a city where there's other law enforcement agencies, and I was on a jury that heard a case of WMATA officer using excessive force against a DC resident. And I guess I'm curious if, is this a topic in those other agencies? Is there any coordination? And, because I think our city's police department is adversely affected by, the fact that other law enforcement agencies may be using.
All right, thank you. Well, I think there are at least more than 24 police forces, whether it's the DC Library Police or the Supreme Court Police.
But I want to thank you very much for asking that question, because what happens is, and even with some of the security personnel that we have in some of the areas that are armed, when they're involved in bad police behavior, a lot of times it's attributed to the Metropolitan Police Department. So that is a challenge for us, when other agencies are involved in that kind of thing. So that's,
right.
thank you very much for asking.
Well, that's the problem in our city. We have too many police forces, but we won't get into that. We have too many chiefs. But anyway, that's enough. Thank you very much. This has been very helpful. Thank you. May we hear from the panel? And is there any official with closing remarks, or shall I do it? Thank you very much for coming. As I like to say in every email I send out, at the bottom the tagline says, local Washington is only as good as the people active in it. You've been active tonight, so thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.